Okay. So our first panelist participant is Thelma Thomas, and she'll be speaking to us about making a compelling statement. Thelma is the Associate Professor of Fine Arts and Director of Graduate Studies at the Institute of Fine Arts, New York University. Thelma's current research centers on late antique, monastic, and luxury arts of the Eastern Mediterranean and cross-cultural exchange. So Thelma, we look forward to hearing from you.
Hello, everyone. So, yes, my topic is what makes a compelling, persuasive application. And what I'll do is just mention a few tips to start the conversation. So one thing I wanted to start with, composing your statement as a fully fledged piece of writing. So give it some shape, not merely a logical outline. And so I also mean to find a way in to that hooks your reader's attention and serves the key explanations that follow. Yeah. So you can use examples drawn from your evidence, your analytical methods, and interpretive frameworks to bring out a kind of productive tension between overarching purpose and the detail that is compelling as well as explanatory. Even as you endeavor to grab your reader's attention and hold on to it, you will need to present as clearly as possible the scope and the purchase of your project in that very brief, usually 2-page research statement. So in that statement, I also advise you to rely on clarity of expression and purpose to build compulsion. Right? So without clarity of expression, the project itself appears muddled. Yeah. So write about it clearly, describe it clearly, and signpost your description. And if the application lacks clarity about the subject or how you intend to treat it, then the reader can have no reason to believe that those features will magically appear in the final product. Now, last things that you want to inspire in your reader are confusion, doubt, questions. That would be offering reasons for the reader to drop your application from consideration, perhaps even before applications are forwarded to the full committee for discussion. As a reader, I seek answers to a set of questions about the delineation of the project. And surprisingly, the most basic questions sometimes go unanswered. So ask yourself, have you situated the reader so that you know the chronological, territorial, and so that they know the chronological, territorial, and cultural extent of your concerns? Have you described the material that you work with? Have you laid out your approach to the material and how your approach responds to previous study? If one of those questions remains unclear, then I'm not likely to put the project at the top of my list. And the more I know about a subject, the more I unconsciously fill in the gaps. So be proactive in trying to fill those gaps for the readers who don't know your subject. That is, convey sufficient historical and historiographical context to make sure that you're reaching the full committee. It is especially important for writing across disciplines to keep in mind that your reader's knowledge may not include the key discoveries or studies important to the way you are thinking about the subject, your subject. Maybe the reader took a seminar on your subject way back in the 80s, so they think they know about it, right? Maybe they, and this might even be worse, maybe they made a contribution to the subject at some point in the past, but never really moved on. So you will have to bring your reader along without condescending to or bashing previous scholarship. Also, write to convince the full committee of the significance and the originality of your contributions to your field of specialization, to art history, and to other relevant disciplines. I keep going back and forth between the micro and the macro, but I think that's something that's very important to do. But getting all of that on paper in your own authentic voice is key. And I'm going to repeat what is an excellent suggestion from a colleague of mine. Before you start writing the proposal, talk it out with a peer. So someone who understands what academic fellowship is, but who is not a specialist in your area of study, right? So record that conversation. So you're not trying to remember what worked or what didn't work, what was persuasive, what wasn't persuasive. And that can save so much time in the writing process by helping you get out of the bubble of your own thoughts, delete the jargon and pet phrases, develop telling details, and revise what's really persuasive. Right? For research fellowships, when you're at or near the beginning of a project, don't try to tie up every loose end. Make your reader want to see how your project will unfold by raising the significant large order questions, and rather than offering answers, lay out the paths that you plan to take through your research and thinking. For fellowships to write up your research, emphasize the completion of your research. Lay out your writing calendar so your readers know that the project will reach completion. And not least, articulate the stakes of your project in your field and discipline, and if relevant, across disciplines. In either case, I think you want to inspire curiosity. So I hope that's helpful, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Great, thank you so much. I think we'll do all three panelists first and then all of the questions and discussion at the end. Our next panelist participant is Kirk Ambrose. He'll speak to us about streamlining the application process on one hand, but then also tailoring applications on the other hand, and perhaps more. Kirk Ambrose is Professor of Art History and founding faculty director of the Center for Teaching and Learning at the University of Colorado Boulder. His latest book project is an edited volume on the 11th and 12th century wood sculpture from the Stave Church of Ørnes in Norway. His collaborators on the project are Margarita Stierstad Andas, the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, and Griffin Murray University College Cork. Kirk, thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Reagan. And I'm also, thank you all for joining us this morning. I wanted to start maybe with a story. As I was thinking about this, I couldn't help but think of my grad school days myself, and probably to an era that probably sounds antediluvian to all of us in terms of technology. I was doing a research project. I was in France for a year. And I was living in a monastery at Vézelay, and decided at one point that I was going to go on a trip to Cluny. And I told the brothers of the monastery that if I received any mail, just to forward it to them, and I gave them my address in Cluny. And about 5 days into this trip at Cluny, I came home one evening to where I was staying, and there was a package. And I opened it up and realized that this was from my home department, and I had been notified that I had been nominated for a fellowship, a CASVA fellowship. And because of all the delays of transatlantic mail, the brothers forwarding it and so on, I had a day to finish it. And I didn't have a computer. I didn't have anything, basically. So the next morning, I woke up and started going through the streets of Cluny looking for a place that had a typewriter and begging folks. And I finally came to an insurance office, and these very kind 3 women took pity on me and said I had 4 hours before their boss came, and he needed the typewriter that afternoon. So I got to work, and I was able to actually finish it. I got the fellowship typed up and so on, and was invited for an interview. Did a transatlantic flight and all that to CASVA and so on. But the experience taught me a couple things. First of all, that it's really good to have a couple key documents in your pocket whenever you're working. And the ones that I keep, and this is probably common knowledge, but I think wherever I'm working on a project, I have 4 things ready to go. One is a short statement of 3 to 4 sentences that describes the project. And this is also really handy for those elevator pitches when you're speaking to, say, a journal editor or a book editor and so on, just to be able to succinctly summarize your project. A longer statement of 300 to 500 words that goes in more in depth and describes that. Table of contents or a very detailed outline. And then finally, a folder that I call what I need. What I need in terms of time, what I need in terms of resources, what I need in terms of photographic rights and all that. So when it comes to a specific fellowship project, I can very, very easily tailor the needs, because different fellowships and different grant will have different needs, and I can make a compelling case. I think one of the things that is annoying as a reader of fellowships is if someone just says, oh, I need time, and doesn't give a compelling reason. We all need time. That'd be awesome. We all need more money. I mean, we're in the begging business sometimes, I feel like. So to make a compelling case and how that advances your project, and it doesn't need to be developed. And one last thing I just say, and I want to leave time for questions, obviously, and curious about your input, but thinking about these documents, these short statements, these applications and so on, I think sometimes we cast these as distractions from our projects or taking time away from our projects, but I really think of them as opportunities to more hone in on what you're getting at in terms of your project. And I think to Thelma's point about that kind of micro macro level, I honestly, every week I go back to my table of contents, I go back to the broader description and so on, and hone that as a way to kind of keep the project moving and keep my needs very, very clear. And as in a sense, it's really easy when an opportunity comes up to then respond to that in a very timely and purposeful way. So thanks.
Great, wow. 4 hours to apply for a CASWA, that sounds terrifying. Okay, our third.
Can I say I also gave flowers to the women the next day, just as I was so appreciative. So and they were yeah. So anyway, so sorry.
That's great. So our third panelist and participant is Glaire D. Anderson, and she will speak to us about writing samples. Glaire is senior lecturer in Islamic art, School of the History of Art at the University of Edinburgh. She focuses on the age of the caliphs, 650 to 1250, and early Islamic Iberia. Her current book explores medieval Islamic science and visual culture through the career of a 9th century polymath in the Umayyad court of Cordoba. Thank you, Glaire.
All right, thank you so much. It's really nice to be here and speak with you all. So I did do just 3 short slides that I can show because I didn't want to forget the things that I wanted to speak to. So I'll just share my screen, Regan, if that's okay.
Yes, please do.
Let's see if I can. Okay, did that work?
No, do I need to give you permission?
It may be that you, it did pop up. It says the host has disabled screen sharing. It's okay. I mean, I can just look at my own slides.
Okay, I think I've changed it now. I've changed it to all participants.
Okay, I think that that might have done the trick. Yes.
Yep, great.
Can you all see that? Okay, so I didn't want to forget the questions in thinking about what makes a good writing sample. So the two in particular that came up, question, which is better, a polished term paper or an unpolished dissertation chapter? I mean, of course, as you all can imagine, there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all. You're going to want to take into account so many different factors, you know, which grant you're applying to, and many other things. But some of the factors that you might think about, and I'll just say that a dissertation chapter, I think, would be quite standard. But I would urge you to polish as much as possible and not send anything that isn't as polished as you can possibly get it to be. But I think as you're thinking about the different factors, thinking about how your writing sample fits with the grant that you're applying to, and in particular, not forgetting to really target your application and including your writing sample to the mission of the funder. So think about, you know, which dissertation chapter most speaks to, you know, to the aims, whether those are the general aims or if there are particular target themes that that your funding body is interested in that year. Which one might work better? A publication. So I think as I was reading the comments, the polished term paper, I think the comment mentioned that term paper was actually in press or was going to be published. So I would say if you have a publication that you can send as your writing sample, that's perhaps preferable, not necessarily, but it does give your funding body a sense of you as a scholar who's out there actually engaging and speaking to others in the discipline. So in that case, the polished term paper, if it's in process or forthcoming, submitted to an excellent journal or something like this would be great. But to go back to the point that that Kirk mentioned, and thinking about these, you know, the process actually of applying for grants, think of this as an opportunity as well. Might that be an opportunity for you to think about one of your dissertation chapters and to use this opportunity to actually work that into a journal article, which you can also submit and sort of kill two birds with one stone, I suppose. So just to move on to the next one. As far as turning the dissertation into a book, and there was a question about the possibility of doing this if you're thinking about postdocs, for example. Obviously, this is a huge topic, and books have been written about it. But one thing that I would just remind you is to consider the differences between the postdocs and the places that you're applying to, because my understanding, at least, and I haven't applied to postdocs in Europe, but my understanding is that in Europe, your dissertation wouldn't be so pertinent because instead you're expected to be developing a new project. So you're going to want to have the dissertation in the background as part of, you know, part of your credentials for applying for this postdoc. But the postdoc itself is going to expect you to be developing a whole different project. Whereas in the US, I think it might be generally safe to say that the postdocs are nice because they give you the luxury of that time to turn your dissertation into a book and to really get your publishing pipeline going. But just some very quick thoughts on turning dissertation into a book. If you can be thinking about your dissertation as a book from the start. Obviously, a dissertation and a book are two very different genres, but if you can think ahead to how you might most efficiently turn your dissertation into a book, whether by kind of easily excising, you know, the literature review, but nevertheless thinking about this this piece of writing as a whole narrative and a strong narrative that's going to work as a book, and understanding the differences between a dissertation and a book. This will help you. My own advice to my graduate students is to look for the books on your own bookshelf that really inspire you, that make you think, you know, this is the kind of book that I would love to write. And then to think about writing your dissertation as the book that you would want to read. I mean, of course, you have to satisfy your committee's requests and so forth. But if you can always keep that goal in mind at the end, at least I found it useful when I was, working on turning my dissertation into a book. It just gave me much more of a feeling of agency, I suppose, over my own work, to think about the fact that this is your own work. So make it into the thing that you want to read at the end. And just very nuts and bolts practical, as you're thinking about dissertation into book, start downloading the publishers' proposal guidelines and their manuscript guidelines for authors. So, the presses will have this information on their websites. You can start downloading those things and start thinking about and absorbing that information. All right, and just some resources that I found useful when I was a graduate student, but also beyond the dissertation as well. So when I was a graduate student, I found this Writing Your Dissertation in 15 Minutes a Day book really, really helpful. It's a silly title, but it's actually quite practical, as is the Clockwork Muse book. I think both of those are really classics, very well used, as is William Germano's book, Getting It Published. One of the things I found as a PhD student was that publishing in some ways was kind of a mystery. And I think Germano's book and books like Thinking Like Your Editor, and there will be others as well, but these sort of take some of that mystery out of the business of publishing and the nuts and bolts of publishing. Because of course, when you're doing your dissertation, you're really focused on learning how to be a scholar, and you're very closely focused on your research as a scholar. So you don't necessarily get this kind of information, but it is out there. And so, look for it. Same thing with Karen Kelsky's series for the Chronicle of Higher Education, and all of the advice that she has put out there on the web as well. I think that's it for me. So I'll stop sharing my screen there. Okay.
Great, thank you so much. Some very useful suggestions there. So I'll end our recorded